Hello, my name is Carlton Herbert, and I decided to do a video overview for the ARC532 final project. I'll be reviewing a mixed-use housing development in Los Angeles that I designed last year during the fall semester. Here is an overall perspective view of the project. It was designed to be a mixed-use building with a primary focus on residential units that were affordable and increased the urban density of the area. In this critical review, I wanted to focus on a couple of the questions we covered in this class. They were, how can we create a just world? Whose history is the right history, and how can we make inclusive cities? I'm going to briefly walk you through the overall design and my intentions of the project with references to several of the theories and readings that we discussed during this class. The project was based in Los Angeles, and residents of the area face many issues when it comes to housing, such as costs, long-term renting versus ownership, proximity to work, many others. Unfortunately, these issues are not new. They represent both current and historical issues with the area. Many of these issues were developed and exacerbated due to the redlining of LA that happened in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Unfortunately, the collective memory of Los Angeles does not adequately remember and teach this topic, so many students, including myself, were unaware of the inequality residents faced in this community historically. This redlining created segregated districts, with Boyle Heights becoming a predominantly low-income and minority community. It stripped power away from the residents and gave it to the wealthier residents and governing bodies instead. Even though this area was not colonized by a different country in a typical sense, I would argue that the development was very similar to colonization, with the area being developed in detrimental ways based on those in power at the time. The development of highways running directly through the area further separated the residents from each other and from the main city by requiring vehicle ownership, which is a very difficult thing for low-income residents. The area is also known for its social justice warriors, with many protests happening throughout the history of the community due to the heavy discrimination and disempowerment they endured. With that in mind, these are the design factors that I established for the project as critical to address: income inequality, high crime rates, and other issues. And so here's the plan I put together to address them. I wanted to improve the natural environment with the addition of vibrant green spaces, create a direct connection to the public transit system, also a public grocery and community garden, and then really focusing on reducing housing costs. I would argue that this area of the city is very fragmented. The zoning is very segregated, and it was hard to define a real spirit to this section of the city, other than just industrial, commercial. I think one of the things that really hurts this part of the city is its disconnect from the natural world as well. The erasure of the natural river by essentially creating a paved man-made version creates an almost dystopian feel. Water seems unnatural, and the lack of green gives a sense of living in an urban wasteland. There are plans to revitalize the river, but currently it doesn't really provide a connection to nature for the residents. And then, like many commercial areas, there's a definite lack of nearby housing as business owners and employees. This ties back to some of the post-colonial practices, which define very separate building zones, which prove detrimental to urban access and add to the urban sprawl effect. Here is a site map for the proposed building. As you can see, I've tried to bring a natural connection with the addition of green spaces and rooftop gardens, and I've also tried to give residents a connection to the city by providing a safe place for local transit. You can see this here at the bottom of the screen. The dedicated bus stop gives a safe place for residents to gather and wait. Also promotes public transit, which reduces traffic congestion, which cities like LA are notorious for. Also offers a much cheaper alternative for lower income individuals. Unfortunately, urban sprawls pretty much require the existence of commuters, but public transit does at least ease the strain on existing traffic systems. And then I also designed a variety of living units to try to appeal to lower income levels, but still offer choices for mid-income levels as well. This attempts to give power back to the residents by giving them options, when most housing projects offer one or two standard configurations. This also gives opportunities for families that live in the complex to stay in the same building, as their families change and grow or shrink over time. When reading about the colonial and post-colonial practices discussed by Jyoti Hosagrahar, I couldn't help but think about how important power was throughout history, and the distinctions of who held that power. In regards to residential architecture, I think the most important power is the power of the residents. When residents are empowered by their living situations, they're fulfilled and improve their surroundings. When residents are disempowered, they often feel trapped and more like a pawn in someone else's game. As far as the size of the building, I went with kind of a hybrid level system with varying heights because I wanted to provide urban density without going quite as far as a high rise. I think that any building taller than about 5 or 6 stories is just built at a scale that's too large for most people to really understand and connect with. This creates a disconnect between the building and the residents. I think of my own two-story home and how I know it inside and out. To me, a home is only truly a home when you understand everything about it. Maybe that's just the architectural mind I have, but I find peace in knowing how everything works and how all the systems work together. I really appreciate learning about the Aranya project by Balkrishna Doshi for this same reason, because he kept the buildings roughly 2 to 3 stories rather than just dropping in a 20-story high-rise, which would have been more land efficient, and I'm sure he was pushed in that direction. Instead, he took the approach that was best for the residents, not the developers. Houses became homes because of the connection between the families and their buildings. They had the opportunity to alter and improve their homes and to find their own senses of place. My project adds a rooftop garden to the area, which empowers residents to grow their own food and socialize in safe public gathering spaces. It brings needed resources of green space, local gardens, and a grocery. The area is considered a food desert, so this garden will improve the collective memory of LA for the residents of this community. I think one of the most empowering things is to be able to provide for yourself and your family. Many low-income residents struggle with this on a daily basis, so even somewhat simple things such as a place to grow their own fresh food would help ease some of these burdens. While not as environmentally conscious as a full green roof, as described by Richard Ingersoll, even the small addition of adding vegetation and planters will help cool the nearby climate and help reduce the heat island effect in urban centers. The project also features a private entrance to provide safety from the road and a more sheltered, safe inner courtyard. Safety is a very important thing in cities, which are often high centers for crime. I would argue that the fragmented nature of cities combined with the income inequalities of their residents creates a disconnect between individuals who find conflicts between each other rather than embracing their similarities. The post-colonial approach should be better utilized in this building, not in an us versus them type of way, but in an ideal situation where those of different backgrounds can work together to improve life for all of the residents. I think the social spaces in my design help with this by giving residents places to learn about each other and not just living in their separate units and only interacting with their neighbors in passing, which seems more typical in the large high-rise communities. While researching the site and its nearby surroundings, I discovered many beautiful instances of street art as well, with many going beyond just the simplistic graffiti approach. Try to connect this to my design with the creation of murals in the white spaces of my building, but I don't think it really provided a proper connection with history and culture of the area. Like Jody Hosegar wrote, one important post-colonial approach in design is a response to the characteristics of region, site, and context, arguing for an identity that was modern but particular to a place. Although this building is modern, I don't think it necessarily is particular to a place. I don't think it necessarily fits into the largely Hispanic culture of the area or could be recognized as a building that belongs to Los Angeles. I think a better connection to the more historical architecture of Hispanic nations would have created a better post-colonial design and connected more to the residents of the community. One could argue that this is a problem with cultural determinism, discussed in Chapter 19, and is an example of cultural essentialism, but I do believe that a lot of culture comes from history. Finding ways to pay homage to the traditional and historic architecture while making modern moves and shifts creates new buildings that tie the two together. They help bring the history into modern times, and I think this building helps to do that. It is built around a central courtyard style with accessible rooftops, which are common in some historically Hispanic regions. So I think the addition of some other aesthetics would improve the building. Although these historical connections exist, the project could be further improved by connecting with the local community to determine housing types and programs that would be of best use for them. Just because something has been used historically, such as central courtyards in hacienda-style homes, does not mean that modern residents would prefer to use them. Like most design projects today, it's very important to learn from the approaches of Marina Tabassum and Balkrishna Doshi by involving the actual residents instead of just making the developers happy in order to have a successful housing development. Overall, I think this project attempts to create a more just world by providing options for those with lower incomes. It empowers residents by offering a safe space to live near many places of business, and it offers an inclusive environment where residents can live and grow together. Thank you, and have a great day.